Bullies tied a quiet farm girl to a tree, one text. Later, her Delta Force husband arrived. An inspiring story by Heartfelt Tales. The rope bit into Sarah's wrists as she struggled against the old oak tree, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. 3 teenagers stood before her, their faces twisted with cruel satisfaction, completely unaware that in exactly 12 minutes, their world was about to change forever. The quiet farm girl they thought was helpless had just sent a single text message that would unleash a force they never saw coming. If you're enjoying this story of courage and unexpected strength, please hit that like button and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales for more inspiring stories that touch the heart. Sarah Mitchell had always been the invisible one. At 23, she possessed the kind of quiet beauty that whispered rather than shouted, auburn hair that caught sunlight like spun copper, gentle green eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the countryside, and a voice so soft that people often asked her to repeat herself. She had married her high school sweetheart, Jake, 2 years ago in a simple ceremony at the local church, surrounded by wildflowers and the rolling hills of their small farming community. What most people didn't know about Jake Mitchell was that behind his easy smile and gentle demeanor with Sarah lay a warrior forged in the crucible of the world's most elite military unit. Delta Force operators don't advertise their occupation, and Jake had specifically chosen this quiet life in rural Montana to escape the shadows of his past. He worked the farm with Sarah, helped neighbors with their harvests, and seemed like any other devoted husband trying to build a peaceful life. The trouble had started 3 months ago when the Henderson boys, Tyler, Marcus, and their cousin Devin, moved back to town after being expelled from their city school for bullying. They were 18 and 19, old enough to know better but young enough to think they were invincible. They had been terrorizing the quiet farming community, vandalizing property, intimidating elderly residents, and making life miserable for anyone they perceived as weak. Sarah had become their favorite target after she had quietly reported their vandalism of the community center to the sheriff. She never spoke about the harassment to Jake, not wanting to worry him or cause trouble. She endured their taunts at the grocery store, their deliberate blocking of her truck on narrow farm roads, and their constant attempts to make her life difficult. Sarah believed that keeping the peace was worth enduring their cruelty, but she had no idea how far they were willing to go. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Sarah was walking the familiar path through Miller's Woods to collect wild berries for her grandmother's birthday pie. The path was secluded but well-traveled, and Sarah had walked it hundreds of times since childhood. She carried a small wicker basket and had her phone tucked safely in her jacket pocket, humming softly to herself as she picked the ripest blackberries from the thorny bushes. The Henderson boys had been waiting. They had planned this for weeks, watching her routines, learning her habits. When Sarah reached the clearing where the massive oak tree stood like a sentinel among the younger pines, they emerged from their hiding spots with the coordination of predators who had finally cornered their prey. Well, if it isn't the little snitch," Tyler sneered, his blonde hair falling across his cold blue eyes. He was the leader, the one who had convinced the others that they needed to teach Sarah a lesson she would never forget. Sarah's basket fell from her trembling hands, berries scattering across the forest floor like drops of dark blood. "Please," she whispered, backing toward the tree. "I don't want any trouble." "Too late for that," Marcus laughed, pulling a length of rope from his backpack. "You already caused us plenty of trouble with the sheriff. Now it's time for payback." Devin, the youngest but arguably the cruelest, grabbed Sarah's arms while Tyler and Marcus worked to tie her to the massive trunk of the oak tree. Sarah didn't scream. She had learned long ago that screaming in these woods brought no help, only echoes. Instead, she did something that would prove to be far more effective. As the rope tightened around her wrists, Sarah managed to work her phone from her pocket. Her fingers, steady despite her fear, typed a simple message to Jake, Oak Tree Miller's Woods. "Hurry." She hit send just as Tyler noticed what she was doing. "Give me that," he snarled, grabbing the phone and smashing it against a rock. The screen shattered into a spider web of broken glass, but the message had already gone through. "There," Marcus said, stepping back to admire their handiwork. Sarah was secured to the tree, her arms pulled behind her around the trunk. "Maybe a few hours out here will teach you to mind your own business." "What if someone finds her?" Devin asked nervously, glancing around the clearing. "No one comes through here this time of day," Tyler replied confidently. "We'll come back before dark and let her loose. By then, she'll have learned her lesson about crossing the Henderson family." What they didn't know was that Jake had been in the barn, repairing a piece of equipment, when Sarah's message came through. The moment he read those 7 words, something fundamental shifted inside him. The peaceful farmer disappeared, replaced by the Delta Force operator who had survived countless missions in the world's most dangerous places. Jake didn't waste time with panic or confusion. He moved with the cold efficiency that had kept him alive through 8 years of classified operations. He grabbed his truck keys, his tactical vest from the hidden compartment in his closet, and the Sig Sauer P226 that he had hoped never to draw again in civilian life. The drive to Miller's Woods normally took 15 minutes. Jake made it in 8, his truck roaring down country roads like a missile locked on target. His mind was crystal clear, running through tactical assessments and possible scenarios. Someone had threatened his wife, the one person in the world who represented everything good and pure that he had fought to protect. In the clearing, the Henderson boys had been amusing themselves by pelting Sarah with small stones and making increasingly disturbing threats about what they might do before they decided to untie her. Sarah endured it all with quiet dignity, her faith in Jake absolute despite her fear. The sound that announced Jake's arrival wasn't the rumble of his truck engine. It was something far more terrifying, complete and utter silence. The forest sounds that had been providing a backdrop to Sarah's ordeal simply stopped. Birds ceased singing, insects stopped buzzing, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Tyler was in the middle of describing what he thought they should do to teach Sarah a proper lesson when a voice cut through the clearing like a blade forged in ice. "Step away from my wife." The 3 young men spun around to see a figure emerging from the tree line. To their eyes, Jake looked exactly as he always had, average height, brown hair, the kind of face that wouldn't stand out in a crowd. But something was fundamentally different now. He moved with a predator's grace, his eyes held depths that spoke of violence witnessed and delivered, and his voice carried the absolute authority of a man who had commanded life-and-death situations. "Hey, Mr. Mitchell," Tyler said, trying to inject bravado into his voice despite the cold fear creeping up his spine. "We were just having a little fun with your wife. Teaching her some manners." Jake's response was to draw his sidearm in one fluid motion, the weapon appearing in his hand as if materialized by will alone. The boys had seen guns before, this was rural Montana, after all, but they had never seen one drawn with such lethal precision, held with such casual competence. "I'm going to say this once," Jake continued, his voice never rising above conversational level. "You have 30 seconds to untie her, apologize, and then you're going to walk out of these woods. After that, you're going to pack your belongings and leave this county. Forever. You can't just threaten us." Marcus stammered, but his hands were already shaking as he reached for the ropes binding Sarah. "I'm not threatening you," Jake replied calmly. "I'm explaining the generous terms I'm offering. You see, gentlemen, I've spent the last 8 years of my life in places where men who hurt innocent people simply disappear. I've become very good at making problems go away permanently." Devin started crying. "We didn't mean any real harm, Mr. Mitchell. We were just messing around. You tied my wife to a tree and threw rocks at her," Jake stated flatly. "In some parts of the world, I've killed men for less." The ropes fell away from Sarah's wrists, and she stumbled forward into Jake's free arm. He held her gently while never taking his eyes or his weapon off the 3 teenagers who were now understanding exactly how close they had come to making a fatal mistake. "The sheriff is already on his way," Jake continued. "You're going to tell him exactly what you did here today. You're going to accept whatever charges he decides to file. And then you're going to disappear from our lives forever. Because if I ever see any of you near my wife again, if I ever hear that you've bothered anyone else in this community, I will hunt you down and introduce you to skills I learned in places that don't exist on any map." Tyler, who had spent months thinking he was the toughest thing in the county, was now sobbing openly. "We're sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. We're so sorry. We'll leave town tonight, I swear." Sarah, safe in her husband's protective embrace, found her voice for the first time. "Jake," she said softly, "they're just scared kids who made a terrible mistake. Maybe we can find another way." It was exactly what Jake expected his wife to say, and exactly why he loved her with a fierceness that amazed him every day. Even after being terrorized and humiliated, her first instinct was compassion. It was also why he had fought so hard overseas, to protect people exactly like her. "The choice is theirs," Jake replied, though his weapon never wavered. They can face the consequences of their actions like men, or they can continue being cowards who prey on innocent people. Sheriff Davis arrived 20 minutes later to find 3 teenagers sitting in a circle, crying and confessing to months of harassment and vandalism throughout the county. Jake had holstered his weapon and was holding Sarah close, checking her wrists where the rope had chafed and whispering gentle reassurances in her ear. The Henderson boys were charged with assault, kidnapping, and a dozen other crimes related to their months-long reign of terror. True to their word, they left the county that night, moving back to live with relatives in distant cities. The community learned that their quiet neighbor Jake was more than he appeared, but no one pressed for details. Rural communities understand that some questions are better left unasked. In the weeks that followed, Sarah healed from her physical wounds quickly, but the emotional trauma took longer. She had nightmares and anxiety attacks, jumping at sudden sounds and struggling to walk through forests that had once been her sanctuary. Jake was patient, supportive, and completely devoted to helping his wife recover her sense of safety and peace. "I should have told you what they were doing," Sarah admitted one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "I thought I could handle it myself." "You did handle it," Jake replied, taking her hand in his. "You stayed strong, you stayed smart, and when you needed help, you reached out for it. That took more courage than most people ever show." "I was so scared," Sarah whispered. "Being scared doesn't make you weak," Jake said firmly. "What makes you strong is what you do despite the fear. You endured, you survived, and you trusted me to come for you. That's not weakness, that's heroism." 3 months later, Sarah received a letter from Tyler Henderson. It was written from a job training program in Oregon, where he was learning automotive repair and living with an uncle who had been a Marine drill instructor. The letter was full of genuine remorse and gratitude. "Mr. Mitchell," the letter read, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed you to know that what happened that day saved my life. When I saw what real strength looked like, how you protected someone you loved without losing control, how you gave us mercy we didn't deserve, it changed everything. I'm getting help for my anger, I'm learning a trade, and I'm trying to become the kind of man you are instead of the coward I was. Thank you for showing me that real men protect people, they don't hurt them." Sarah cried when she read the letter, not from sadness but from hope. Jake held her close and marveled once again at his wife's capacity for forgiveness and her faith in people's ability to change. The incident in Miller's Woods became a turning point for the entire community. Other victims of bullying found their voices, speaking up about harassment they had endured in silence. Parents had difficult conversations with their children about respect, courage, and the difference between strength and cruelty. The community grew stronger, more connected, and more protective of its most vulnerable members. Sarah eventually returned to walking the forest paths she loved, though now Jake often accompanied her. They would collect berries together, him carrying the basket while she selected the ripest fruit, talking softly about their dreams for the future and the children they hoped to raise in this place of peace they had fought to preserve. Jake never spoke publicly about his military service, but word quietly spread that their community was protected by someone who had dedicated his life to defending the innocent. The knowledge that a guardian walked among them gave the people of the valley a sense of security they had never fully appreciated before. On quiet evenings, Jake would sometimes find Sarah standing by the kitchen window, looking toward Miller's Woods with a thoughtful expression. When he asked what she was thinking about, she would always give the same answer: how sometimes our greatest challenges reveal our greatest strengths, and how love always finds a way to protect what matters most. The old oak tree where Sarah had been tied still stands in the clearing, but now it serves as something different, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, help can be just one call away. Children from the community sometimes play around its massive trunk, never knowing the story of courage and love that unfolded in its shadow. Their parents watch with smiles, grateful that their little ones are growing up in a world made safer by quiet heroes who ask for nothing more than the chance to protect those they love. Sarah and Jake Mitchell continue to farm their land, serve their community, and build their life together with the knowledge that real strength comes not from the ability to harm others, but from the willingness to stand between those we love and any force that would hurt them. Their story spread throughout the county, not as a tale of violence or revenge, but as a testament to the power of love, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the truth that heroes often wear the most ordinary faces. Thank you for joining us for this powerful story of love, courage, and redemption. If this tale touched your heart, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. share a time when someone stood up for you, or when you found the strength to protect someone you cared about. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this story, share it with friends who need to hear about the power of standing up for others, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales for more inspiring stories that remind us of the good in humanity. Ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Remember, we all have the power to be someone's hero. Sometimes it just takes one call, one moment of courage, or one act of standing up for what's right. Thank you for being part of the Heartfelt Tales family, and we'll see you in the next story.